Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome. Welcome back to Colorado State University and the Ag Innovation Summit. Pleasure to have you with us here this evening in what is really a kind of an informal kickoff to tomorrow's Ag Innovation Summit. You know, it's been since 2015 that we've really played that role of the land-grant university, convening important conversations around a safe food supply, a secure food supply, and one that makes wise stewardship of our natural resources. Pleasure to have you here with us tonight as we start to plant those first seeds, start to think about the conversations we're going to cultivate, the ideas we're going to harvest. I have more metaphors that we can use this evening. But really, it is about making those connections and networking together, something that the Ag Innovation Summit has been founded upon. So looking forward to having great discussions with you today and tomorrow, especially about food safety and about agricultural biosecurity. There's a lot of drivers of change in the industry of agriculture, whether that be a growing population or climate change. If it's a more demanding food industry or evolving consumer preferences, maybe it has to do with government or the role of technology. And it's our opportunity, maybe even our responsibility, to recognize that change and to be able to drive that change. And so our program is designed for us to find those spaces, those important spaces around innovation and being able to build and drive change. And so I'm very, very proud to have you with us this evening as we kick that off. I'd like to say a few words of thanks to, in particular, to our sponsors who've helped us out and put this together. This includes the Colorado Livestock Association. It also includes various divisions within Colorado State University, our external relations, and our folks in engagement, and in the College of Agricultural Sciences, all being part of that, as well as the Office of the Vice President of Research, Alan Rudolph, with us here tonight. So thank you to all those folks who've helped us provide those sponsorships and set the table for us today. You'll hear a little bit more about those as the Ag Innovation Summit happens along. I'd also like to take the chance to recognize some folks that are here with us this evening. I just want to draw some particular attention to those folks. This includes our honorary event chair, Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, who's with us and who has been here with us all day helping us through some of our events. Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. I'd like to draw attention to somebody who's very important to the leadership of the university. That's Provost Rick Miranda. Rick Miranda's back near the end of the ballroom. If you're looking for something to talk to Rick about, you might appreciate this fact. He is one of only two entities that has both sung a national anthem and thrown out the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game. The other entity is the heavy metal band Metallica. Provost Miranda. It's a pleasure to welcome Commissioner Don Brown with the Department of Agriculture and Deputy Commissioner Jen Yezak, who's, they may not have been able to make it in. I understand there was a little bit of a slowdown as they came up I-25. State Representative Jenny Arndt is here, the chairperson of the House Ag, Livestock, and Natural Resource Committee. Jenny's with us this evening. Oh, there she is, back there. Hi, Jenny. And we also have representatives from Senator Bennett's office. James Thompson is here. Senator Gardner's office, that's Darlene Carpio. I think Darlene I just saw sitting right there. Thank you, Darlene. And from Congressman Buck's office, that's Dusty Johnson. Well, you know, one of the things that's true is land-grant universities are important to convene conversations, generate new knowledge, kind of really drive that change that we talked about before. But maybe the thing we're most proud about, the thing that we invest the most in, is our students. And from time to time this evening and tomorrow, you're going to hear from some of our very best students, folks that will help us, that are ready to engage in what the future of agriculture is, ready to be the innovators of tomorrow. One of those students is going to be our Masters of Ceremonies this evening, and that's Ryan Latta. Ryan, would you join me on stage?
Thank you, Dr. Pritchett. It's always a good time here. This is actually my second year here at the Ag Innovation Summit, and really excited to see some familiar faces and also talk about the thing I love most, which is agriculture. So to set the stage for tomorrow's conversation, we've invited a couple of speakers to reflect on the opportunities they see for agriculture innovation along the Front Range and the potential for a revitalized National Western Center campus to serve as a local platform for innovation with global impact. Before we get going, I'm going to introduce those people that are going to be answering questions. We're going to have more of an informal time to answer questions from the audience. So if you think of questions while our speakers are giving a little talk after they're introduced, feel free to start lining up by that microphone over on this corner of the stage here. And then once we have time for Q&A, we can fire off those questions and see if we can stump them in their answering of them. But before, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit more. Dr. Pritchett gave a little bit of introduction on me. My name is Ryan Latta, currently a junior studying soil and crop sciences along with applied information technology and also agricultural literacy here at CSU. So hopefully I can still get out in 4 years, still working on it right now. But I expect to graduate spring of 2020 and potentially stay and work for CSU, helping with student success, which really relates to one of my jobs that I'm doing here on campus right now. One of our first speakers is Mark Sarangelo, Chief Executive Officer of Quanstar LLC. Mark Sarangelo is currently the founder and CEO of Quanstar. He is most recently the head of Sierra Nevada Corporation's Space Systems, one of the country's top space builders, having led or participated in over 400 space missions, including over 50 planetary missions. Mr. Sarangelo is a founding member and now chairman emeritus of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, the commercial space sector's leading trade group. He is the founder and chairman of eSpace, the Center for Space Entrepreneurship, a nonprofit that supports the startup and growth of entrepreneurial technology companies. Mr. Sarangelo has been recognized with numerous corporate and personal awards, including induction to the NASA Space Foundation's Technology Hall of Fame and the world's top 10 innovative space companies by Fast Company. Mr. Sarangelo has served as the Chief Innovation Officer of the state of Colorado, chairman of the Colorado Innovation Network, and is currently the state's appointee to the Colorado Energy Research Collaboratory. He is on CSU's College of Agricultural Sciences Ag Industry Council and has been working to make the world a safer place for children as a board member of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which has resolved over 100,000 missing children cases to date. Mr. Sarangelo has a multifaceted personal background, including being a long-term licensed pilot and successful creative artist. He holds a Bachelor of Science, MBA, and doctorate degrees, and has served his country proudly as a U.S. Army officer. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Mark Sarangelo.
I think the introduction is going to be longer than my talk. Good evening. I am so thrilled to be here tonight and to be part of this. And I had the pleasure of being here at the very beginning of this, and I would like to call out Ajay if he's in the room, I believe somewhere. He hates to be called out, but I'd like to just recognize all the efforts that he's done to make this an event that's going to be really memorable and quite special. But over the years, he's been such a find here for the university, first in the business school and now in the ag school, and as a friend of mine. So Jay, thank you very much for all the work that you've done to make this possible. So I'm going to just talk and give you a little bit of a story. And about 115 years ago, the New York Times wrote an editorial, which I had cut out and copied and put up in my office. And you heard a lot of that. I came from the space industry, and I'll get to that in a minute. In that editorial, the New York Times said that if we took all the people who were in science and all the best mathematicians and all the best people who understood how the world worked, and we gave them 1,000,000 years, maybe we could figure out how to fly. That was done in October of 1903. About 12 hours after that was done, Orville Wright wrote in his book, "We assembled the first Wright Flyer today." And you think about innovation, and you think about what people's perception of that is, and you're going to hear a lot tonight and over the next days about what innovation means. And I want to maybe just make it a little bit, take a different take on it, because as the Chief Innovation Officer of Colorado for 3 years, it was a wonderful ride. It was such an amazing job and an amazing place to be, because I basically went around the state and I got to talk to people who were doing things that were just so different and so unusual. And most people, when they think of innovation, think of technology, and it really isn't. It is change. It is doing something that's different. It is making something different than it was before. And that's one way of looking at it. The way I look at it is it's dreaming. It's taking something that's in your head and turning it into something that's real. And my story is a little bit of that kind of story. I came from a family that was in agriculture, and my introduction to wanting to be someday in the space industry was looking up at the stars while picking apples and trying to move them. And it was quite a different existence, except with one big exception, which was that I have the privilege of being a fourth-generation pilot. My great-grandfather was a balloonist, and my grandfather flew, and my family went from balloons to biplanes to props to jets. And growing up, they said the only two things left for you to do, Mark, is to fly helicopters and go to space, and they used to make a big joke of that. As it turns out, I wound up doing both, so you can't really run away from your family. But one of the things that was quite interesting for me as I did this was the understanding of early stage flying and innovation. My grandfather restored old airplanes, and when you do that, you understand what that means to put something together that's cloth and wood and a metal engine, and you take it and you go fly. And you think about what that meant. And when he learned to fly, he got 5 hours of flight time, 5 hours of training, and his first flight was his first solo. And the only time that he ever got the training, the instructor stood on the wing of the plane and told him what to do, and he left him with an instruction. The instruction was, if anything goes wrong, put the plane down in the water because we don't need you, we need the plane. And you come away with that, and you think of how far we've come in that industry and what that meant. And my life in agriculture and flying was as a crop duster growing up. And as we live in the mountains here, and I'm sure many of you have gone skiing, and you see the 7-year-olds who go down the slopes, and they're going down slopes that I wouldn't even look at, let alone go down, and they go down this without any fear. That's what it literally is like to do crop dusting. And to be able to do this and to understand that you're looking back on it, I was flying in a way that I probably wouldn't fly now, even with thousands of hours of flight experience after that. But it was part of the agriculture world that sort of fit into my brain. And it just made me realize what the land meant and what it meant to be part of ag and what it meant to be different. And my grandfather's innovation in ag was to become part of what was one of the first farmers' co-ops at a time where there wasn't co-ops in the area. And they realized that in order to get, my case was apples and pears, get them to the market from upstate New York to New York City, that they weren't being able to do that very effectively. So he became one of the leaders of the co-op that was started up there. And the biggest thing he ran into was not figuring out how to organize the co-op, not figuring out how to organize transportation. Instead of using trucks, they brought a train up, not figuring out how to distribute the apples and get them to the market on time. The biggest thing he ran into was the fact that everybody argued that in order to make this work, you put your apples in and you got paid by the pound. But nobody wanted to admit that their apples weren't the best in the valley, so they all wanted a little bit more than everyone else did. And innovation at that time brought a lot of change to that world. And as it's come down through the years and through the decades, it's changed a lot. And I had the opportunity to do a lot of different things. I started as a nature photographer in my life, but I wound up doing something that was a dream for me, which was to get into the space industry. And I tell this story because we look at what innovation is and what you hear about and all the young people that you're going to see and talk to and all the new companies, and you wonder, how do they make it? And here was a kid like me who came from a farm and decided to start a space company. And one of the first things I decided to do is that I wanted to build a replacement for the space shuttle. And we had about 22 people in the company at the time. NASA had about 18,000. We had maybe $1,000 or $2,000 of extra money. They had about $10 or $20 billion of extra money. But there was a time and it was a place. And about 17, 16 years ago, the space industry changed. And a few of us decided that we could innovate and change what the space industry was. I went down the road of trying to build a spaceship. Others, like Elon Musk, went down the road to build a rocket, and others did other things in space. But collectively, the space industry has changed. It's changed quite a bit. And over my period of time, where I started as a kid with no space background, no industry background, I came out of a very different world. I was able to put together a team and a lot of people to follow a dream. And that dream, to me, was to do something to go to space. Never in my wildest dreams when I started did I realize what we were going to wind up doing. I've been on hundreds of space missions, something we've built. We've built something that's gone to 7 of the 9 planets, including Pluto, which, by the way, I am the chairman of the Let's Make Pluto a Planet Society again. For those of you who don't know, we sent the mission to Pluto, and you think ag takes a long time. It took 12 years from the time we started building this to when it actually got to Pluto. And it took that long to get there, billions of miles of flight. And about halfway through, somebody decided that planet Pluto wasn't going to be a planet anymore. So we had to phone up this little spaceship and tell it that it wasn't a planetary mission anymore. And the thing started crying. It was really not a fun experience. But you come out of that and I realize that something you've built has gone out that far and that far away. And one of the things that we were able to do is we were successful over a period of time, after a lot of losses, a lot of failures, to actually wind up getting the contract to build the next generation space shuttle. Multi-billion-dollar contract, lots of wonderful people who've helped me along the way. But there are a couple people who made a huge difference to me, which is one of the reasons why I think we're all here, many of us are here, is because we want to give back in a way that makes a difference. One of them was John Glenn, and John Glenn and Neil Armstrong, both of whom decided that they were going to take this kid who didn't know what he was doing and kick his ass around and make sure that he stayed on the straight and narrow to actually do something different. And they did, and they helped me in ways that I can't go into tonight. But what they did tell me is that when you do this, when you go through life, one of the things that's most important, and probably maybe the only thing that's most important, is what you leave behind, is the path that you walk and how you get there and what you leave behind. And in my case, following a dream that led me from an apple farm and a horse ranch up to being in the space industry and going beyond, and bringing together, at the end of that journey, at the end of my time, bringing together to be the first company to grow food on the space station. We grew lettuce first, and we grew the first flower that bloomed in space, and it was done on Valentine's Day a couple of years ago. It was a zinnia, for those of you who are interested in flowers. And we grew the first food, and we're now growing food in a very consistent way. And part of what my company had to do is figure out, how does one grow food? And I stepped back from that and I said, isn't this amazing? Though I went on this path, became this person in aerospace and technology and innovation, and it brought me right back to the place where I started, which was, how do you grow food? All the innovation, all the work that I've done, all the things that mattered to me were all encompassed in that effort. And that's what you're going to see today, and that's what this summit is about in my mind. It is about changing, it's about innovation, but mostly it's about taking a lot of people, some young, some not so young, and giving them the chance to make their dream and let their dream come true. Someday, the food that we grow is going to move to the next generation, it's going to move to the next place, maybe to another planet. And I'll tell you just one thing about food. Think about the fact that you can't water anything in space because water doesn't go down. Things about that comes out, and the innovations that we've been able to figure out. Why did we do that? Well, at the end of the day, it is what you leave behind. And as I close out my remarks today, it is what we leave behind. The reason we went into food growth is because we realized that about a third of this planet has trouble with food. And if you can learn how to grow food in space, in constant sunlight, in terrible conditions, with very little water, and you can bring that knowledge back, maybe you can make the world a better place and leave the path that you leave behind a little bit better. So I'm going to turn it over now to my speaking partner for the night. She is an amazing executive and leader, and she's going to tell you the future of what's going on in Colorado, what we're doing with the Western Center. But what we do in agriculture and what we do here matters so much. And what I think the ultimate, and what you're going to hear now in a minute, is how do we converge all the industries in Colorado into one? How do we take space, which now enables a third of ag, and make it part of the ag industry? How do we take bioscience and make it? Colorado has 14 key industries, many of which can be part of the ag industry. And I think the future and what we're going to see in this innovation and what we're going to hear about in the next day is going to be, how do those things merge? How do we create an opportunity, not just for the state of Colorado, for the world, and certainly for Colorado State. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Sarangelo. That's really cool stuff. Space is neat. All right. Our next speaker is Ms. Jocelyn Hiddle, who's the director of the Denver Program Development for the Colorado State University System, and also working on that awesome National Western Project. Ms. Hiddle directs the program development for the National Western Center Project, including managing CSU's facility design and acting as a liaison between CSU's faculty and staff and the project partners. Please help me in welcoming Ms. Jocelyn Hiddle.
Thanks. Happy to be here again this year, and also, just for the record, also a fan of Pluto. So I'm hoping actually everyone comes up and takes a stance on Pluto tonight and tomorrow. So I really took to heart, I know many of you were here last year. I'm happy to see your faces again. I really took to heart the charge that I give you an update. So I am not giving you a whole lot of information on the history of the National Western Center tonight. I'm really going to focus on what's happened and what has changed since I spoke with all of you last about a year ago, or in some cases yesterday or this morning. So I really am going to focus on what's new with the National Western, but just for those of you who need a memory refresh or haven't heard anything about the National Western Center before, just a reminder, this is where it is. It's really at the crossroads of Colorado, right at I-25 and I-70. And this is important for a number of reasons. It really is a space that is easy to get to from, or as easy as it is to get anywhere in Colorado, it's easy to get to the National Western Center. It's also highly visible. There are about 150,000 cars that go by this space every day, so it's a great opportunity for us at CSU and our partners at the National Western to showcase what's happening in Colorado around ag and ag innovation. Also a reminder that it is a collaboration between 5 partners. There are 3 of us who are really on the ground. That's the City and County of Denver, CSU, and the Western Stock Show Association. 2 museum partners that are bringing programming to the site. And we also have, and this is where I get to the update part, since I saw you all last, the National Western Center Authority has become an actual thing. It is now an entity that will be overseeing the development of this site. Well, not the development as much as the programming. So once we have developed the facilities, the National Western Center Authority takes that on. They will be in charge of booking and marketing and making sure that this place is vibrant and active throughout the year. We have also nominated an executive director for that organization, and so we are really moving. So as we start to build facilities as a team, this entire group of partners, the National Western Center Authority will take that on, with the exception of CSU's facilities. So we will still be managing our own facilities, and I'll tell you more about the progress on those facilities here in a moment. So really exciting progress on the overall structure. We also, just as a reminder, this is really a space that is focused on a lot of different scales. We are looking at this as a global campus, so a place where all of those 5 partners together are thinking about these global challenges in food, in energy, in water, in health, both human and animal, and the environment. So we're thinking about these global challenges. We're thinking about how the great ideas and information and research that's coming out of CSU and coming out of the Front Range can be exported around the world, but also how do we learn from other places around the world so that we can be a showcase and really help to advance the state of the art. It is, as far as I know, still the largest redevelopment project in the country, so it is really an opportunity for us to showcase what we're doing. It is a space that we can use as a living laboratory, so how can we actually take a look at the campus itself and use it as a research opportunity and showcase that? So as that largest redevelopment project in the country, we do think that it is a global draw, that people will be coming to see what we're doing and how we're doing it. It is also, however, a local space. So we are very focused, and we continue to be very focused on what is it that we are doing that's responsive to the surrounding communities. So we are constantly going out and having conversations with our neighbors to understand what it is that they want and be responsive to that. And when I say neighbors, I do really mean our neighbors in the neighborhoods right around the National Western Center. But I also mean the Denver Metro, and I also mean really the entire state of Colorado, and I'll tell you more about that. We have, since I last saw you, taken all of the buildings that we put down on a map during the master planning process, we picked them all up and we put them somewhere else. So that's a pretty exciting development since I saw you all. Some of them moved more than others, but we have an entirely new site plan for the National Western Center And that you can see sort of reflected in these images, both the two I just showed you and this one, about where those buildings are. It starts to give you kind of a feel for what this place is going to be like. This is looking sort of south on the site. There's some large facilities. There's still the equestrian center where a lot of equine events will happen, the livestock center where we'll have livestock shows and conferences and other events. And you can tell, of course, that this is just a conceptual rendering because all of the cows are pointing in the same direction, which is a little creepy, and I'm going to have to tell people to change that on this image. But it starts to give you a feel of the scale of this site and how exciting it is. It starts to get me really, really energized and excited about seeing shovels in the ground and buildings come up out of the ground, which will start next year. So just to give you a quick update on the CSU facilities in specifically. So the water building, we were calling it the Water Resources Center. We're now simplifying and calling it the water building, is going to break ground next year. And it's really exciting to be able to say those words, that we are actually going to break ground on a building next year. We have started design. We were in design workshops this week. That's why I've seen some of you in the last couple of days. And this design process is a great opportunity for us to really hone in on the exact programs we're going to offer in that space. This is, as a reminder, still a collaboration with Denver Water, but it is a space that we want to bring together everyone who touches water from various different disciplines and from various different sectors. There are educational programs that will be happening in this facility, both K-12 and higher ed. We are working on developing some new master's programs that will live in this space. It also will focus a little bit on policy and understanding how we can advance the conversation around water policy in the West. It also will focus on research and innovation. And I have added a new topic as of tonight's comments from Mark about how we deal with water in space. So this is a new research topic that I think we need to be sure we add to the list of things to tackle here. So this is just a conceptual rendering that was done by our designers, so don't take it seriously and don't get mad at me if it's not exactly what it looks like when we're done. But we're really excited to be taking this big step forward and starting design on that facility. We have also started conceptual design on our second building, which will be an animal health complex. I'm not sure how well that shows up, but it has a lot of different components to it, one of which is equine sports medicine, one of which is a small animal clinic that will be run by Denver Dumb Friends, one of which is the Temple Grandin Equine Center Equine Assisted Therapy Program, which is already up and running in Denver, and we will be building a new facility to house it, as well as a lot of educational facilities. So you can see all of those pieces are starting to actually come together into images of the buildings that we'll have. Just to give you an update also on the Western Stock Show Association side of things, they are also reimagining their spaces, and they will be, this is a conceptual design of their new legacy building, which will be right across the street from our facilities and will house the new National Western Club. So I'm assuming most of you go to the stock show and you know that going in to eat at the National Western Club is tough. These drawings are really fancy. It's going to be nice. So get excited for when that will be done. Another update for you all, and this, I have to say, was driven a lot by work that was done by CSU faculty and researchers, and I thank them for their engagement on this project. We set a net zero energy goal for the National Western Center when we did the master plan back in 2014. This is starting to become a reality, and the modeling work and the other work that CSU faculty have done have really helped to push this. So just earlier this week, we announced that we will be selecting Enwave as an energy partner to come and bring the energy infrastructure that will allow us to get to net zero on the site, which is a really exciting development and really driven by the forward thinking here at CSU. As I mentioned, we have really been focusing on listening to our surrounding neighbors. So there is a really long list of ways that we've been engaging with the neighborhoods around the National Western. But we also know that the state, you may remember that the state has invested in us and is funding our facilities at the National Western via a separate funding mechanism that the state put in place back in 2015. So we really feel like with the state investing in us, we need to invest in the entire state. So along with Christy Vilsack, who is here in the room, we have been doing some listening tours. Christy's really been leading these listening tours around the state to understand what our extension agents, our ag experiment station staff, our ag educators and economic development and elected officials are interested in having the National Western provide statewide. And there are a number of different things that might emerge from that. You could think of some virtual content that we might be able to provide with the National Western as a hub. Perhaps we're bringing people to the National Western for training. Maybe we're going out. Maybe there are mobile units. There's lots of different ideas, but we really want to be sure that what we're thinking about is how the National Western Center can be a statewide asset. Many of you in the room have participated in those conversations, and I appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness on that. I will also mention we have really been focusing on launching some of the programs now that we know are going to live in all of those buildings. So in April, for example, we hosted our first Water in the West Symposium, which Secretary Vilsack was instrumental in helping us to plan that. He also hosted a conversation with the current Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, where they sat on stage together and had a conversation about water in the West and really showcased how we can come together to talk about complicated issues. That event sold out. We're really excited about having that event again in March of this coming year and continuing to have those kinds of conversations to showcase what's coming once the National Western facilities are built. So I'm not going to go into detail on this. I'm just going to point out that there is a lot of work underway at the National Western right now. There is infrastructure being built. There are roads getting designed. There are initial facilities that are happening. So there's a ton of activity. When you come down to Stock Show this year, it will be a little different. And every year for the next 7 years or so, it will be somewhat different. So just be ready for that and please help spread the word to everyone that it's going to be worth their patience, that what we are building is going to be something really special and will advance the conversation around ag. You know, and I think one of the things that I was also thinking about as I was listening to Mark speak is really what we are creating here. You know, as much as I just focused on what the bricks and mortar actually is, what we're really creating is more of a space for culture, right? And as much as I love strategy, I think many of you have heard the phrase that culture eats strategy for lunch, right? So we really want to create a space here that has this culture of innovation, that has this culture of collaboration. And so really my charge is to try to create the physical space that fosters that. And I'll ask for your continued help in figuring out how best to do that, because I do think that that's one of the most important things that this place can provide. So with that, I will just encourage you, if you're interested in staying updated, other than annually when I come and talk to you about what's happening down at National Western, there are ways to do that. You can text that number to get updates on your phone, or please do visit nationalwesterncenter.com. You can get updates that way. And with that, I will wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Hiddle, for that exciting National Western Center update. I'm sure we all look forward to the completion of that project, but it looks like we'll have to wait a little more. So now I'd like to open up the microphone to anyone who would like to ask questions of these two, either further about their own lives or what they're doing in agriculture, or really it's just an informal time to ask more about them and see what else they've got cooking on the back burner.
I also have the opportunity to sit on the board of the Western Colorado Horticulture Society. We're the organization that helps to organize education opportunities and in many ways represent fruit growers on the Western Slope. We've talked on our board about how we can get involved in the Western Center, and so at some point in time I'd like to talk to you about that. But I'm curious, how can industries across Colorado that maybe aren't always tapped in as well to Denver and to the intersection of Colorado, as you put it, participate in the program?
So I think there are a lot of opportunities for us, and again, I think this statewide approach that we have initiated is something that is sort of unearthing some collaborations we hadn't really thought about early on, and that will be certainly ongoing work. I would encourage you, if you have specific folks who are interested in engaging at National Western, to have them reach out, because we are we're really in early days, and even once the facilities are built, it's an ongoing, evolving space where we want new ideas and new collaborators coming in and working with us. It's such a unique opportunity to have a university to be part of such a large redevelopment project that's focused on education and that's focused on entertainment and that brings in new audiences. So I certainly would be happy to talk about specific industries and collaborative opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Top. Any other questions for these two? All right, well. Do you have a question, sir? Walking around? Okay. Cool, no worries. All right, sweet.
He's just bringing
He's
me
on a
my
mission.
food tonight. That's
He's on a mission to get some food. I might have to do that the same. All right, well, I encourage you. Ooh, do you have a question? Awesome, cool.
Hi, I'm Cindy Brown. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Bioagricultural Sciences and Pest Management here in the College of Agricultural Sciences. And I have a question about what role do you envision the center playing in sort of creating or facilitating markets between rural agriculture and urban, like farm to table sort of thing, or is there anything in the center right now about along those lines?
That's an excellent question. So I think one of the things that again, both in terms of location and sort of the audiences that are coming and going to that site, it is the perfect place for us to be thinking about rural and urban connections. And one of the ways I know some folks here at CSU are thinking about that is sort of the food system supply chain and how those things are really connected, and telling the story really about both ways, right? How each are dependent on each other. Becca Jablonski is leading a team of folks I know who are really focused on that. And so any follow-up questions should go to Becca.
Good, I know her. So.
Yeah, good. I kind of thought you might.
Thanks.
You know, one of the things, if I could also add to it, that, please, you can sit down if you'd like. I think that's attracted me to be part of this, or try to be part of this, is that we see a lot of infrastructure, we see a lot of activities, some wonderful designs and plans, but I know from everything I've talked to with the team leading this, that this is meant to be a living center, it's meant to be a growing center. It's meant to be a center where people can come and not just learn and develop or show off, but create. The Innovation Center part of this is to take an idea and to take that idea and give it some support, some mentorship, some money perhaps, and give it a place to go to the next level. And it's really fascinating when I've started to get involved with CSU, and I think this is still the case, but this inbound class coming into the college, more than half, and I think it's closer to 60 or 70%, came from families that were not in the ag industry. And I think that's just amazing. That number has just completely flipped. And you ask yourself the question, why? And I think the question is that there's a whole lot of young people who see the future of water and food as being central, not just to life, but to be able to give them a future and give them a path to go somewhere else. And these are families who didn't grow up on a farm like I did. They didn't grow up with cattle. They didn't grow up in apples. And they decided to come in and do things that were different. And I think what's really fascinating underneath this is that it's meant to create organizations, businesses, technologies that will then go off and do things around the world. It's not just a teaching facility. It's not just a place to show off livestock or to explain to the world what we're doing and why it's so special here in Colorado. It's a place to create things that can be taken to the next level. And that doesn't exist anywhere, not like this. And it's really, really a special opportunity. And that special opportunity isn't just to the people who live in Denver. And that's, I think, where, to the previous question, so much of the innovation, when I traveled the state as the innovation officer for several years, did not exist in the major metropolitan areas. It existed anywhere. And if what we have in the technology world does anything, and it shows us, you can create technology in the middle of Africa and sell it around the world. It's not limited to a geographic site. And having this center as a center for Colorado, as a center for CSU, and to me as a center for the next level of innovation, is really what makes this so special, because it perpetuates itself. It creates people who will go out and be successful, who then come back and put their heart and soul back into the school and into the center. I think that is an amazing thing, and that's what Jocelyn is leading and the team behind her is doing.
I'm Tom Vilsack, and I am a big fan of innovation. But one of the concerns I have about innovation, and I'd appreciate your thoughts about this, as you talked, it occurred to me that when you do innovation in space, you aren't necessarily displacing existing industries. You're not creating new opportunities, but also displacing or disrupting existing opportunities. You're creating a whole new frontier. How do we speak to those people and those industries that are going to be disrupted by innovation? Not just the positive side of innovation, but the impact of innovation. How do we reassure them? What kind of advice would you give to Colorado State to address the issue of transition for those people who are transitioned out of opportunity because of innovation, so that they're not frustrated by innovation, they're not resistant to innovation and the science that develops it?
Thank you. You have a future in government, I think, if you work hard. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I think the answer there is, when you think of innovation, many people think of all of a sudden something happens and life changes. That isn't the way it works. It is a process. It is a gradual process. And I think the way to manage the disruption or the displacement is an understanding the transition that happens and helping that transition period, because it doesn't happen very quickly. You know, when I was growing up, my grandfather was amazed by this new concept that was pick your own apples. He didn't quite understand how people would come in and pay him to do the work that he used to do to get them apples. And he sat on the porch and watched this happen, and he just didn't understand that. But he didn't run away from it either. He adopted that innovation. I'm being a little silly, but the seriousness of it is that I think the innovation as it happens, and yes, you might say space might be different, but really not. The things that we do in space come back and change what we do here on the ground quite actively. And it does displace things. So what we've looked at and what I've seen is, in the process of innovation, you have to put the equal amount of energy in the process of change of the people who are there. And I think that's where it gets missed a lot. You can't just put energy into finding the next technologies. You have to put energy into figuring out how those technologies integrate, sometimes backwardly integrate into where we are. About a third of agriculture is space enabled. All the major combines use GPS. I can tell you where to water your farm from space. Those are all good things, and they may change the way you do business. But I think the way we look at it and the way to really happen is to put some energy and money into understanding that maybe it's re-education, maybe it's redeployment, maybe it's really figuring out how to change, adapt that change into the old ways of doing things or the older ways of doing things. And very often that doesn't happen. We deal with the money and we deal with the excitement of the new shiny thing. But we don't realize, in order for that shiny thing to happen, it has to come back and work in the real world. And that process of integrating it back in the real world, I think, is what one of the things the center is trying to do. And it does that not just by putting this building up, by bringing people who have done this work, who have taught it, who have been it, who have lived it, to be there with the innovators, to show them why this industry needs to come along with the innovation. And I think that would be my recommendation on how we do that.
I think we have time for one more question.
Mark Sponsler, Mark Sponsler, Colorado Corn Growers Association Executive Director. I'm staggered at the complexity of just building, coordinating, planning, and executing to get the doors open. What my question though is about is, how is the management structure envisioned, ongoing, to be sure to be able to embrace, an ever evolving, dynamic industry set of industries that this center is designed to embrace? How do you structure it so that the door is open to new people, new crops, new technologies? That looks just as complicated to me.
Yeah, that's a great point. So one of the lines that we are walking, even in the piece that is about the bricks and mortar, is trying to create a space that accommodates what everyone is working on now, but also what everyone's going to be, and I mean that not only CSU researchers, but also our industry partners and private sector collaborators. You know, what's everyone working on now? And then also trying to leave room for what we don't know, and when we don't know, we don't know. So what's the next 50 years look like? We're building this for at least that long. So I think as we're thinking just about the structures, it helps us then to also think about the governance and how we ensure that we're bringing in the right people who think in that kind of dual way, and that we're establishing the right partnerships so that we are constantly getting folks who are coming to us and saying, this is what's new, this is the next, so that we can tell that story, and also so we can support it from a sort of academia, private sector collaboration perspective. So I think the question there is, again, a little bit of a cultural question. We have to understand that the National Western Center needs to both showcase what's happening and also always have an eye on what's coming. And so the folks that we bring in to help us do that and lead that will need to keep one foot in both worlds.
Awesome. Thank you for all the questions. And please join me in thanking our presenters again today.